The Dreamliner hums at 35,000 feet, first-class passengers sipping wine, when flight attendant Karen Voss storms up to a black family, Malcolm and Grace Coleman with their teenage son Jordan, snapping, "Show me your tickets." They comply, unfazed. But she sneers, "You don't belong here," and forces them off mid-flight via an emergency landing in Iceland. Passengers gasp as security hauls them away, Karen smirking, until a voice crackles over the intercom. They own Horizon Airways. Her victory sours fast. What's her next mistake? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more jaw-dropping tales. Karen Voss strutted back onto the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, her navy blue uniform crisp despite the chaos she'd just unleashed. The plane sat grounded on a windswept tarmac in Iceland, refueling after the emergency landing she'd demanded at 35,000 feet. Her lips curled into a smug grin as she adjusted her scarf, scanning the first-class cabin with a predator's gaze. Passengers whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting between her and the empty seats where Malcolm, Grace, and Jordan Coleman had been moments ago. "I know a fraud when I see one," she barked, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. A woman in a silk blazer clutched her purse tighter, while a balding man with a Rolex pretended to read his magazine. Karen reveled in the silence, the power she wielded over these pampered fools who dared question her authority. She'd been a flight attendant for 12 years, and no one, not even the captain, crossed her when she was on a mission. Those three didn't belong in first class, she decided the moment she saw them, their dark skin clashing with the leather seats and crystal flutes. She'd won this round, and they were gone. Outside, the Colemans stood in a frigid shed on the edge of the runway, a makeshift holding area with cracked concrete walls and a single flickering bulb overhead. Malcolm, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair, adjusted his cashmere coat against the biting wind seeping through the gaps. Grace, elegant in a tailored burgundy dress, stood beside him, her posture unyielding despite the indignity. Their son Jordan, 16 and lanky, scrolled on his phone, unbothered by the security guards looming nearby. The family's calm was unnerving, a stark contrast to the chaos Karen had stirred. Grace pulled out her sleek black phone, her manicured fingers tapping the screen with precision. "Get me Richard," she said, her voice low but firm. Within minutes, Richard Hayes, Horizon Airways chief operating officer, was on the line, his voice crackling through the speaker. "Grace, what the hell happened?" She didn't flinch. "One of your attendants decided we don't belong on our own plane. Fix it." Malcolm glanced at her, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Jordan looked up, muttering, "She's toast." Back on the jet, Karen leaned against a galley counter, sipping a lukewarm coffee as the refueling crew clanked outside. She'd already radioed the captain, a spineless man named Greg Tillman, convincing him the Colemans were a security risk who'd somehow slipped past check-in. He'd grumbled but agreed to the landing, too tired to argue with her iron will. She replayed the scene in her head, the way Malcolm had handed over those tickets with a steady hand, the way Grace's eyes had locked onto hers without a flicker of fear. It nagged at her, but she shoved it down. They were nobodies, she told herself. Freeloaders who'd conned their way into luxury. She'd seen it before. People like them trying to game the system, and she always caught them. The intercom buzzed, and she straightened, expecting a routine update. Instead, Captain Tillman's voice came through, shaky and clipped. "All crew, prepare for passenger reboarding. The, Colemans are returning to their seats." Karen's coffee slipped from her hand, splashing across the galley floor. Her stomach twisted as she stormed to the cockpit, shoving past a junior attendant who yelped in surprise. "What do you mean returning?" she snapped, her face inches from Tillman's. He wiped sweat from his brow, avoiding her glare. "Orders, from the top. They're cleared." She opened her mouth to argue, but the jetway door swung open, and there they were. Malcolm led the way, his stride deliberate, Grace beside him radiating quiet fury, Jordan trailing with his hoodie up still. Glued to his phone, the cabin erupted in murmurs as the family reclaimed their seats, Malcolm easing into the leather with a king's grace, Grace smoothing her dress like nothing had happened. Karen's chest heaved as she stood frozen at the front, her victory unraveling in real time. Then the booze started. A wiry man in a pinstripe suit hissed first, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "You're a disgrace." A woman with a pearl necklace joined in, her tone venomous. "How dare you treat them like that?" The chorus grew, a wave of anger crashing over Karen as passengers turned on her. She clenched her fists, her cheeks burning, and barked, "Mind your own business." But it was too late. The Coleman sat unbothered, Malcolm flipping open a financial magazine. Grace sipping a fresh mimosa, the junior attendant rushed to deliver. Jordan glanced up, catching Karen's eye with a smirk that made her blood boil. She wanted to scream, to drag them off again, but a figure stepped into the cabin, silencing her rage. Richard Hayes, Horizon's COO, strode down the aisle, his gray suit impeccable despite the transatlantic scramble. His bald head gleamed under the cabin lights, and his sharp blue eyes locked onto Karen with a predator's focus. "Miss Voss," he said, his voice smooth as steel, "you've made quite a mess." She squared her shoulders, forcing a smile. "I was protecting the airline standards, sir. They didn't look right for first class." Richard's brow arched and a ripple of gasp spread through the cabin. He turned to the passengers, raising a hand for silence, then faced her again. "Malcolm and Grace Coleman founded Horizon Airways 20 years ago. That boy you humiliated? Their son, Jordan. They own every inch of this plane, including your paycheck." The words hit like a sledgehammer, and Karen's knees buckled. She gripped the armrest beside her, her mind racing to catch up. Owners? Impossible. She'd seen their tickets, hadn't she? But the truth sank in, cold and heavy, as Richard continued. "You'll finish this flight, but we'll talk in London." Karen's smirk vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped grimace as she stumbled back to the galley. Her hands shook as she wiped the spilled coffee, the passengers' booze echoing in her ears. She'd won, hadn't she? She'd gotten them off, proved her point. But now they were back and she was the fool. She glanced at the Colemans, expecting smugness, but they ignored her. Malcolm circling stocks in his magazine, Grace whispering something to Jordan that made him chuckle. The plane taxied back to the runway, the engines roaring to life. And Karen's stomach churned. She thought she'd dodged a bullet, that Richard's presence was the worst of it. She was wrong. Mid-flight, as the Dreamliner soared over the Atlantic, a ping sounded from her phone. She fished it out, expecting a crew update, but the screen glowed with a notification that stopped her heart. A video, uploaded 30 minutes ago, titled, "Racist Attendant Boots Owners." She tapped it, and there she was, captured by a passenger's shaky camera in Iceland. Her voice blared through the tinny speaker. "Show me your tickets." The clip cut to her sneering, "You don't belong here." Then panned to the Colemans' calm faces as security dragged them away. The final frame froze on her smirk, the intercom crackling. "They own Horizon Airways." Comments flooded in, "Fire her! Disgusting! Racist trash!" She scrolled, her breath shallow, as the view count ticked past 10 million. Her name, Karen Voss, was tagged in every post, every tweet, every furious rant. Passengers around her glanced. At their own screens, some gasping, others glaring her way. A teenage girl in row 3 whispered, "That's her," loud enough to sting. Karen shoved the phone into her pocket, her pulse hammering in her throat. 10 million views, and they were still climbing. She'd finished the flight, sure, but this wasn't over. The Colemans hadn't said a word, hadn't needed to. Their silence was a weapon, and she'd handed them the ammunition. She peeked out from the galley, catching Jordan's eye again. He held up his phone, the video still playing, and mouthed, "Checkmate." Her victory in Iceland was dust, and London loomed like a guillotine. She'd humiliated them, but they were about to bury her, and the world was watching. The Dreamliner touched down at Heathrow under a gray London sky, its wheels screeching against the wet tarmac as the cabin buzzed with unease. Karen Voss lingered in the galley, her fingers gripping the counter until her knuckles whitened, the echoes of passenger booze from Iceland still ringing in her ears. She'd finished the flight, kept her head high despite that blasted video hitting 10 million views mid-air. But her gut churned. What had she stepped into? The Colemans, Malcolm, Grace and their smug teenage son Jordan hadn't said a word since reboarding, their silence louder than the jet engines. She'd won, hadn't she? She'd shown them who ruled this plane. But as the jetway locked into place, a sharp rap on the galley wall snapped her from her thoughts. Daniel Pierce, Horizon Airways Vice President of Operations, loomed in the doorway, his tailored black suit stark against the cabin's soft lighting. His jaw was set, his hazel eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Miss Voss, with me." "Now," he said, his voice a low growl that made her stomach drop. Karen followed him through the first-class cabin, her steps stiff, her navy blue uniform suddenly feeling too tight. Passengers stared, some whispering, others tapping their phones, probably refreshing that cursed video. Malcolm Coleman sat near the window, his broad frame relaxed as he adjusted his cufflinks, while Grace sipped tea from a porcelain cup, her burgundy dress pristine. Jordan sprawled across his seat, earbuds in, scrolling through something that made him smirk. Did they know what was coming? She caught Malcolm's eye for a split second, and his steady gaze sent a shiver down her spine. She'd humiliated them, sure, but why did it feel like they were the ones in control? Daniel led her past the jetway into a sterile airport office, its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He slammed the door shut, turned, and fixed her with a stare that could melt steel. "You're off all flights, indefinitely," he said, his words landing like a punch. "Suspended, effective immediately." Karen's breath caught in her throat, her mind scrambling to catch up. "Suspended? For what? I was doing my job," she snapped, her voice rising as she planted her hands on her hips. Daniel didn't flinch, just crossed his arms, his silver tie pin glinting under the harsh light. "Your job? You forced an emergency landing over nothing. You ejected the Colemans, our founders, because you didn't like their faces." Her cheeks burned as she stepped closer, jabbing a finger at him. "It was a misunderstanding. They didn't look like they belonged in first class. I had every right to check." The door creaked open behind her, and Malcolm's deep voice cut through the room like a blade. "You saw our skin, not our seats," he said, stepping inside with Grace and Jordan trailing behind. Karen spun around, her pulse hammering. How long had they been listening? Daniel's lips tightened into a thin line as he gestured for the Colemans to sit, though they remained standing, a united front of quiet power. Grace tilted her head, her dark eyes boring into Karen. "You didn't check the manifest, did you? You didn't call the gate. You just assumed." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the words stuck. She'd glanced at their tickets, sure, but that was protocol, wasn't it? Jordan snorted, pulling out an earbud. "She thought we stole. Classic." Karen's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. "This is ridiculous. I've been with Horizon for 12 years. You can't suspend me over one mistake." Daniel reached into his briefcase, pulling out a tablet, and tapped the screen. "One mistake? Let's see what the crew thinks." The screen flickered to life, displaying a leaked group chat from the flight crew's private app. Karen's name glowed in bold. "Karen Voss, 3:47 p.m. Those uppity freeloaders in 1A1C don't belong here. Probably scammed their way in. Taken care of now." Her stomach plummeted as Daniel scrolled, revealing more. "Karen Voss, 3:52 p.m. Captain's a pushover, but I got him off." The room spun, her breath shallow as she stared at her own words, typed in a fit of triumph mid-flight. How had they gotten this? She'd sent it to her team, trusted colleagues who'd always backed her up. Daniel's voice was ice. "This hit X 10 minutes ago. News crews are outside. You're a liability now." Karen's knees wobbled, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I can explain this, it's out of context." Malcolm stepped forward, towering over her, his cashmere coat brushing the edge of the desk. "No context justifies that," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. "You didn't just insult us. You insulted every passenger who's ever been judged by people like you." Grace nodded, her voice soft, yet cutting. "And now the world knows." Karen's mind raced, grasping for a lifeline. She could sue, couldn't she? Wrongful suspension, defamation, something. She glared at Daniel. I'll fight this. You'll see me in court." He didn't blink, just pulled her badge from his pocket and slid it across the desk. "Your ID's deactivated. You're banned from all Horizon flights until we say otherwise. Get out." She snatched the badge, her hands trembling, and stormed toward the door, shoving past Jordan, who muttered, "Good luck with that." The Heathrow terminal buzzed with chaos as Karen burst out of the office, her heels clicking against the polished floor. A swarm of news vans clogged the arrivals area, cameras flashing like gunfire. Reporters shouted, "Karen Voss, is it true you're a racist?" Microphones thrust into her face and she shoved them away, her voice hoarse. "No comment." A screen overhead blared CNN. "Flight attendant suspended after viral video, racist rant exposed." Her face, frozen in that smug smirk from Iceland, stared back at her, captioned with her crew chat, "Uppity freeloaders." Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts from coworkers, "You're done, Karen," and strangers, "Rot in hell." She shoved it into her purse, her chest heaving as she pushed through the crowd, their jeers clawing at her. How had it spiraled this fast? She'd been in charge 12 hours ago, untouchable. Now she was a pariah. She ducked into a taxi, slamming the door as the driver eyed her in the rearview mirror. "Rough day?" he asked, his accent thick. She ignored him, staring out the window as London's gray streets blurred past. She'd sue, she told herself again, her mind churning with plans. Horizon couldn't do this. She'd expose their overreach, rally support. She wasn't the villain here, was she? The taxi pulled up to her hotel, and she stumbled out, her purse slipping to the ground. As she bent to grab it, a shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting a reporter, but it was a teenage boy, maybe 15, his face twisted in disgust. "You're that woman from the plane," he spat, then hurled a soda can at her feet, the sticky liquid splashing her shoes. She recoiled, shouting, "Get lost!" But he was already gone, leaving her alone in the drizzle. Back at Heathrow, the Coleman sat in the VIP lounge, a glass-walled oasis overlooking the runways. Malcolm sipped a bourbon, his broad hands steady, while Grace stirred her tea, the clink of her spoon the only sound. Jordan sprawled on a leather couch, his phone glowing with the latest X-posts about Karen's downfall. "She's trending #1, he said, grinning. Grace glanced at Malcolm, her voice low. "She thinks this is the end." Malcolm set his glass down, his eyes narrowing. "It's just the beginning." They'd humiliated her, sure, but suspension wasn't enough. Karen had ignited a fire, and they'd fan it until she burned out. What would she try next, they wondered, as the lounge's TV flickered to a news anchor. Karen Voss, branded, a bigot, vows to fight back. Stay tuned. Hey YouTube fam, what do you think? Comment #1 if you agree Karen's getting what she deserves for judging the Colemans, or #2 if you think Horizon's gone too far kicking her out. Like that. Should she own up or keep fighting? Like this video if you're hooked on this wild ride, and subscribe to catch every twist ahead. Justice or revenge? What's your take? Now, here's the big question. Will Karen's next move dig her deeper? Or does she have a trick up her sleeve to flip this mess around? Stick around to find out. Karen Voss slumped in her cramped London hotel room, the stale air thick with the scent of cheap carpet cleaner and her own desperation. The TV flickered in the corner, muted, its screen looping that cursed CNN headline. Flight attendant suspended after viral video, racist rant exposed. Her navy blue uniform lay crumpled on the bed, a relic of her 12-year reign over Horizon Airways cabins, now stripped away by Daniel Pierce's cold suspension. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, notifications piling up. Hate, messages, death threats, and a few sympathetic whispers from old co-workers who'd quickly gone silent. She'd stormed out of Heathrow vowing to fight, and now, 48 hours later, she had a plan. She wasn't the villain here, she told herself, rubbing her temples as the soda can incident replayed in her mind. Horizon had overreacted, humiliated her over one mistake. She'd sue them, claw her way back and prove she was right all along. She'd found Victor Lane through a late-night Google search, a sleazy lawyer with a slicked-back ponytail and a reputation for winning messy cases. His office smelled of cigar smoke and regret, tucked above a pawn shop in East London, but his grin was predatory as he leaned across his chipped desk. Wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress? We've got a gold mine, he said, tapping a pen against a yellow legal pad. Karen nodded, her jaw tight. They can't suspend me over a hunch. I was protecting first-class standards. Victor scribbled notes, his eyes glinting. We'll spin it. You're the victim. A hard-working woman crushed by woke corporate nonsense. I'll get you a press conference tomorrow. She left his office with a flicker of hope, her hands steadier than they'd been since Iceland. She could turn this around, couldn't she? The world would see her side. The press conference took place outside a drab courthouse, a podium hastily set up under a drizzle that soaked Karen's borrowed blazer. Victor stood beside her, smoothing his tie as cameras clicked, and reporters jostled, their lenses glinting like vulture eyes. She gripped the microphone, her voice hoarse but defiant. I've served Horizon Airways loyally for 12 years, ensuring safety and order, she began, her breath puffing in the cold air. I made a call based on protocol, and they suspended me without evidence, bowing to a mob. This is discrimination. Against my diligence, and I'm suing to prove it. Victor chimed in, his tone oily. Miss Voss is a scapegoat for a company terrified of bad PR. We're seeking reinstatement and damages. A few reporters nodded, scribbling furiously, while others smirked, their phones already pinging with updates. Karen's chest swelled. Was this her comeback? Online, the response trickled in fast. Fringe groups on X rallied behind her, their post dripping with venom. Karen's a hero against entitled elites. Cancel culture's gone too far. She scrolled from her hotel bed, a smirk tugging at her lips as likes climbed into the thousands. A podcast host emailed Victor, offering her a slot to tell her truth. She pictured the Colemans, Malcolm with his smug cufflinks, Grace with her icy stare, Jordan with his infuriating grin, watching her rise from the ashes. She'd flipped the narrative, hadn't she? The video from Iceland still haunted her, 10 million views and counting, but now she had traction. She leaned back, sipping a tepid coffee, imagining Daniel Pierce squirming in his fancy office. Let them try to bury her now. Her smirk vanished 3 hours later when her phone blared with a news alert. She tapped it, and her blood ran cold. Horizon Airways had released cockpit audio, time-stamped from the Iceland landing, and it was everywhere. CNN, BBC, even trending on TikTok. The clip opened with Captain Tillman's shaky voice. Karen, you sure about this? Then her own words snarled through the speakers, sharp and venomous. They don't deserve first class. Look at them. I'm not serving that trash. The audio cut to her laughing as Tillman muttered, Okay, your call. Her coffee cup slipped, shattering on the floor, brown liquid pooling around her feet. She stared at the screen, her face frozen in horror as the clip looped, her sneering voice echoing in her skull. How had they gotten that? The cockpit was her domain, her safe zone. Someone had betrayed her. The press swarmed again, this time outside her hotel, their shouts muffled through the thin walls. Karen, did you mean it? Are you racist? She yanked the curtain shut, her pulse hammering as she dialed Victor. They've got audio. Fix this, she barked, pacing the room like a caged animal. His voice crackled through, unnervingly calm. Relax. We'll say it's edited, taken out of context. Meet me at court in an hour. She grabbed her coat, her hands trembling, and slipped out a back exit, dodging a reporter who lunged with a microphone. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade slick with rain, and Victor waited inside, his ponytail dripping. The judge, a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses, barely glanced at Karen as Victor argued, This is a smear campaign, Your Honor. My client's words were twisted. Karen nodded, her chin high, clinging to the lie. Couldn't they see she was the victim? The Coleman's lawyer, a towering man named Edward Klein, rose with a tablet in hand, his gray suit crisp against the courtroom's dull wood. We have more than audio, he said, his voice smooth and lethal. He tapped the screen, projecting a grainy photo, Karen at a crew party 2 years ago, laughing as she toasted with a coworker who'd just been fired for harassing a black passenger. "Miss Voss has a pattern," Edward continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "3 complaints of racial profiling buried by Horizon until now. This isn't a mistake. It's who she is." The judge's gaze hardened, and Karen's stomach lurched. She whispered to Victor, "That's not fair." But he hissed, "Shut up." Edward played the audio again, her sneer filling the room, and the judge slammed her gavel. "Case dismissed. Frivolous litigation. $10,000 fine, payable to the court." Victor's face paled, his pen dropping to the floor. Karen stumbled out of the courthouse, the fine ringing in her ears like a death knell. $10,000. Half her savings. Gone. The drizzle had turned to a downpour, soaking her blazer as she pushed through a new crowd. This one uglier than the reporters. Protesters lined the street, their signs jagged and furious. "Racist Karen must pay. No justice, no peace." A woman in a red coat spat at her, the glob landing on her cheek, and Karen recoiled, wiping it with a trembling hand. "I'm not racist," she shouted, but her voice drowned in their chants. A man hurled a tomato, the wet thud against her shoulder sending juice dripping down her arm. She broke into a run, her heels slipping on the pavement, until she reached a narrow alley and collapsed against a brick wall, gasping for air. Her phone buzzed. Victor texting, "I'm out. You're toxic." She stared at the screen, alone, soaked, and broke. Across town, the Colemans watched from their penthouse, a sleek tower overlooking the Thames. Malcolm stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his bourbon glass catching the city lights, while Grace lounged on a velvet sofa, her tea steaming beside her. Jordan sprawled on the floor, his laptop open to the latest X posts. "Karen Voss fined. Audio proves she's trash," he grinned, scrolling through memes of her drenched and fleeing. "She thought she'd win," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. Grace set her cup down, her lips curving slightly. "She doesn't know losing yet." Malcolm turned, his eyes dark with resolve. "She will." The audio had been their opening salvo, a calculated strike, but they weren't done. Karen's counterattack had crumbled, and now she was vulnerable. What would they hit her with next? Karen huddled in the alley, the rain pooling around her feet, her blazer clinging to her skin. The fine stung, the protesters' hate stung worse, but the audio, that was a knife in her gut. She'd been so sure she could spin this, so sure the world would see her as the wronged party. Now she was a punching bag, her name a curse on every screen. She pulled out her phone, the cracked screen glowing with a news alert. Karen Voss. Lawsuit fails. Protests erupt. Her hands shook as she scrolled, the tomato juice still sticky on her sleeve. She'd fight dirtier, she told herself, her breath ragged. This wasn't over. But as the Colemans watched from their penthouse, their next move already in motion, she had no idea how deep the hole she'd dug would get. Karen Voss trudged through the rain-soaked streets of East London, her soaked blazer clinging to her shoulders, the sting of the $10,000 fine still raw in her chest. The protesters' chants, "Racist Karen must pay," echoed in her mind, their spit and tomato juice a bitter memory on her skin. Her hotel room loomed ahead, a dingy box with peeling wallpaper and a flickering bulb. But it was sanctuary compared to the chaos outside. She'd lost her lawsuit, her lawyer Victor had bailed, and her name was poison online, the cockpit audio. "They don't deserve first class," looping on every news channel. She collapsed onto the sagging mattress, her cracked phone buzzing, with more hate, and buried her face in her hands. She'd fight back, she told herself, her breath ragged. Horizon couldn't break her. But as she stared at the ceiling, a new dread crept in. What if this wasn't just about her anymore? Her phone rang, shattering the silence, and she flinched. The screen glowed with her sister's name, Lisa Voss, a gate agent at Horizon's JFK hub. Karen answered, her voice hoarse. "Lisa, thank God, I need you." A pause stretched too long, then Lisa's voice came through tight and cold. "You're on speaker, Mom and Dad are here." Karen sat up, her pulse quickening. "What's wrong?" Lisa exhaled sharply. "What's wrong?" You're all over the news, Karen. I just got fired. Horizon canned me this morning. Karen's stomach dropped, her mouth dry. Fired? Why? Lisa's laugh was bitter. They dug up my old tweets from 5 years ago, stuff about those people at the gate. Said it's a pattern with our family. Guess who tipped them off? Karen's mind raced to Malcolm Coleman, his calm, cutting words in that Heathrow office. You saw our skin, not our seats. Before she could respond, her father's gruff voice cut in, a retired mechanic who'd taught her to stand her ground. And your husband's out too, Karen. Steve got a call from his supervisor. Horizon terminated his pilot contract. 20 years. Gone. Karen's chest tightened, her breath shallow. Steve, her quiet, steady husband, had flown for Horizon. Since she'd started, a loyal cog in their machine. That's insane! He didn't do anything! Her mother chimed in, her tone trembling. They found a report he buried, Karen. 2 years ago, he hushed up a complaint about you harassing a black family and coach. Said he didn't want you disciplined. The Colemans got it all. Karen's hands shook, the phone slipping in her grip. Malcolm and Grace weren't just coming for her. They were dismantling her whole world. She ended the call, her family's voices fading into a dull roar in her ears. She paced the room, her wet shoes squeaking on the linoleum, her mind spinning. Lisa's tweets, Steve's cover-up, how had they found that? She'd been careful, hadn't she? But the Colemans owned Horizon, every file, every whisper. She grabbed her coat, her resolve hardening. She'd beg them, make them stop. She couldn't lose everything. The penthouse address flashed in her memory. Grace had mentioned it in an interview once, a sleek tower overlooking the Thames. She took a cab, the driver silent as she stared out at London's blurry lights, her reflection pale and hollow in the glass. Could she convince them to back off? She had to try. The elevator ride to the Coleman's penthouse felt like an eternity, the mirrored walls mocking her disheveled state. Matted hair, stained blazer, eyes red from sleepless nights. She knocked on the double doors, her knuckles raw, and Malcolm answered, his broad frame filling the entryway. He wore a charcoal sweater, his salt and pepper hair catching the soft glow of a chandelier behind him. Miss Voss, he said, his voice smooth and unreadable. What a surprise. She swallowed, stepping inside as Grace emerged from a marble kitchen. Her burgundy dress swapped for a silk robe, her dark eyes sharp. Jordan lounged on a velvet couch, his phone in hand, smirking like he'd been expecting her. You're destroying my life, Karen blurted, her voice cracking. My sister, my husband, they're innocent, call it off. Malcolm crossed his arms, his gaze steady. Innocent? Your sister tweeted about those people needing to know their place. Your husband buried your dirt to save you. They chose their sides. Grace stepped closer, her perfume sharp and floral. You thought you could judge us and walk away. You started this war, Karen. Karen's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. I didn't mean it like that. I was doing my job. Jordan laughed, loud and mocking, from the couch. Your job? You kicked us off our own plane, lady. You don't get a pass. Karen's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stand. Please, I'll do anything. Just stop. Malcolm's lips twitched, almost a smile. You started this. Fire. Now you burn. She stumbled out of the penthouse, the elevator doors closing on Grace's final words. You'll see what losing feels like. The cab ride back was a blur, her mind numb as Malcolm's calm fury replayed in her skull. She'd begged, and they'd laughed. She reached her hotel, shoving the key into the lock, and froze. The door hung ajar, splintered at the hinges. Inside, chaos awaited. Her clothes shredded, her suitcase overturned, the walls scrawled with red spray paint. Bigot. Die racist. Her breath hitched as she stepped over broken glass, her uniform torn into rags on the floor. A brick lay in the center, a note tied with twine. You're next. Her hands shook as she clutched it, the ink smudged but clear. Who had done this? The protesters? Someone worse? She sank to her knees, glass crunching beneath her, the weight of her family's ruin crashing down. Lisa's job, Steve's career, her parents' shame, gone because of her. She'd thought the lawsuit's failure was rock bottom, but this was deeper, darker. Her phone buzzed, a news alert piercing the silence. Karen Voss's kin disown her. Family ties cut after Horizon scandal. She tapped it, her vision blurring as she read. Her parents had spoken to a tabloid, their words stark. "We can't defend her anymore. She's on her own." Lisa had texted earlier, unopened until now. "You ruined us. Don't call." Steve's last message was a single word. "Goodbye." She dropped the phone, her sobs echoing in the trashed room, alone in a way she'd never imagined. Across the city, the Colemans gathered in their penthouse dining room, a glass table gleaming under a modern chandelier. Malcolm carved a roast, his hand steady, while Grace poured wine, her silk robe rustling. Jordan scrolled through X, chuckling at a photo of Karen's vandalized room. Someone had leaked it already. "Her sister's out, husband's done, parents ditched her," he said, popping a grape into his mouth. Grace sipped her wine, her voice low. "She begged us to stop." Malcolm set the knife down, his eyes glinting. "She doesn't get mercy. Not after what she did. They'd stripped her family bare, exposed every weak link and watched it collapse. But this was just the surface. They had more planned, a deeper cut waiting." Karen curled into a ball on the hotel floor, the bricks note crumpled in her fist. Her savings were half gone, her career torched, and now her family, her anchor, had abandoned her. She'd pleaded with the Colemans thinking she could sway them, but their cold rejection had shattered that hope. The vandalism was a warning, the tabloid a gut punch, and she had nothing left to fight with. Or did she? She wiped her eyes, her breath steadying as a flicker of defiance sparked. She'd lost everything, but she wasn't dead yet. She'd find a way to hit back, dirtier than before. But as she plotted, the Colemans' penthouse lights glowed across London, their next strike already loaded, ready to crush her fledgling resolve. Karen Voss crouched amid the wreckage of her East London hotel room, the jagged graffiti, "Bigot! Die, racist!" staring back at her from the walls like accusing eyes. Her shredded uniform lay in tatters, the brick with its ominous note, "You're next," clutched in her trembling hand. Her family had abandoned her, Lisa's job gone, Steve's career torched. Her parents' words in that tabloid cutting deepest, "She's on her own." The $10,000 fine had gutted her savings, and the protesters' fury still echoed in her ears. She'd begged the Colemans, Malcolm, Grace, and Jordan at their Thames-side penthouse, only to be met with Malcolm's cold dismissal. "You started this fire." Now, broke and alone, she rocked on the floor, glass crunching beneath her, her breath shallow. Was this the end? She'd lost everything, hadn't she? But a flicker of defiance sparked in her chest. She wouldn't let them win. Not yet. A knock jolted her upright, sharp and insistent against the splintered door. She stumbled to her feet, peering through the peephole, her pulse racing. A woman stood there, mid-30s, with a sleek bob and a navy trench coat, her smile warm, but calculated. "Karen Voss, I'm Tanya Brooks, PR specialist," she said, her voice smooth as honey when Karen cracked the door. "I've seen what they're doing to you. I can help." Karen squinted, wary, her fingers tightening on the knob. "Help? Why should I trust you?" Tanya stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hallway tile. "Because I've turned worse. Messes into gold. We'll get you on TV, spin this right. You're not the villain, Horizon is. $5,000, and I'll make the world see it." Karen's mind churned. 5,000 was her last dime, but what choice did she have? She let Tanya in, the woman's perfume cutting through the stench of paint and despair. Tanya paced the trashed room unfazed, her phone already out. "Here's the plan," she said, tapping the screen. "A live broadcast, prime time. You apologize, show remorse, blame Horizon's pressure. People love a redemption arc." Karen nodded, her throat dry. Could this work? She'd flipped narratives before, hadn't she, with that lawsuit? It failed, sure, but this felt different. Tanya's confidence was infectious, her brown eyes glinting with promise. "I've got contacts at Channel 5, she added, texting furiously. "Tomorrow night you're on. Wear something humble. Gray sweater, no makeup. We'll rehearse, all day." Karen handed over her last $5,000 in cash, her hands shaking as Tanya pocketed it with a nod. "You won't regret this," Tanya said, and for the first time in days, Karen believed her. The next day blurred into a haze of preparation, Tanya drilling her in a rented studio flat near Camden. Karen memorized lines, her voice softening with each take. "I made a mistake, but Horizon turned me into a scapegoat." Tanya coached her tears, timing them for maximum impact, and by evening, Karen felt ready. She stood in the Channel 5 studio, a gray sweater hugging her frame, her face bare and pale under the harsh lights. The host, a wiry man named Paul Hensley, introduced her with a smirk. "Karen Voss, the flight attendant who sparked a global firestorm. Tonight she speaks." The camera rolled, and Karen's voice trembled, rehearsed but raw. "I'm sorry for what happened on that flight. I judged too fast, but Horizon's punishment was cruel. I've lost everything, my job, my family. I just want a chance to make it right." A tear slid down her cheek. Perfect timing, and she exhaled, her chest light. Had she nailed it? The studio audience clapped, a few nods rippling through the crowd, and Paul leaned in, his tone gentle. "That took guts, Karen. What's next for you?" She opened her mouth to answer, hope flickering, when Tanya stepped onto the set, her trench coat swapped for a sharp blazer. The air shifted, and Karen's smile faltered. Tanya grabbed a microphone, her voice cutting through the applause. "What's next? Let's talk about what she really meant." Karen froze, her pulse hammering as Tanya turned to the camera, her warm smile gone, replaced by a predator's grin. "I'm not just a PR rep. I work for the Colemans. Malcolm, Grace and Jordan, this apology?" She air-quoted, her tone dripping with scorn. "It's a lie. Here's the truth." A screen behind them flared to life, replaying Karen's rehearsal footage from the flat, secretly recorded. Her voice blared, unfiltered. "I don't care about those people. Horizon's the real problem, screwing me over." The audience gasped, murmurs rising as Tanya narrated. She didn't mean a word of that sob story. "She paid me to fake it, to dodge accountability for kicking the Colemans off their own plane." Karen's jaw dropped, her hands clawing at the air. "That's not true. You tricked me." Tanya smirked, tossing the microphone to Paul. "She's unrepentant. A racist who'll say anything to save herself." The crowd erupted, boos crashing over Karen like a tidal wave, louder than Iceland, fiercer than the courthouse protesters. Eggs flew from the back row, splattering her sweater, yolk dripping down her chest. A man shouted, "Liar!" as security rushed in, too late to stop a soda can from clipping her shoulder. Karen bolted, shoving past Tanya, who stood smug and still, her arms crossed. She stumbled into the studio lot, her breath ragged, the night air cold against her sticky skin. Trash pelted her, cups, wrappers, a half-eaten sandwich, until she ducked behind a dumpster, sobbing into her hands. $5,000, her last lifeline, gone. Tanya had played her, a Coleman puppet all along. How had she fallen for it? Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Karen Voss's fake apology exposed. Public fury reignites. She didn't look. She knew what it said. Across London, Grace Coleman watched from a private jet cruising at 40,000 feet. Her silk robe traded for a cashmere sweater, a glass of Pinot Noir in hand. The TV streamed Channel 5, Karen's tear-streaked face fleeing the studio, eggs streaking her gray wool. Grace's lips curved, a faint smile breaking her poised exterior. "She'll never learn," she murmured, sipping her wine. Malcolm sat across from her, his bourbon untouched, his broad hands folded. "She thought she'd outsmart us," he said, his voice low and steady. Jordan poked his head from the jet's lounge, his hoodie up, grinning. "Tanya's the MVP. That footage, chef's kiss." Grace set her glass down, her eyes glinting. "She's broke now. Let's see how she fights with nothing." Karen huddled behind the dumpster, her sweater reeking of egg and defeat, the booze still ringing in her skull. She'd poured her last dime into Tanya, trusted her slick promises, and walked into a trap. The Colemans hadn't just humiliated her, they'd stripped her bare, turned her plea for redemption into a public execution. Her family was gone, her savings vanished, and now her name was a punchline again, worse than before. She wiped her face, her fingers sticky, and stood, her legs wobbly but her jaw set. She'd lost this round, sure, but she wasn't finished. She'd find another way, someone else to trust. But as she staggered into the night, Grace's words from the penthouse echoed. You'll see what losing feels like. What could they possibly do next? Hey YouTube crew, what's your verdict? Comment number 1 if you think Karen deserved that brutal takedown for faking her apology. Or number 2 if you feel the Colemans went too far setting her up like that. Was Tanya's twist pure genius or pure evil? Hit like if you're loving this roller coaster of justice, and subscribe to catch every jaw-dropping turn ahead. Tell us, should Karen keep clawing back, or is she digging her own grave? Now buckle up. With no money and no allies, how deep will the Colemans bury her next? You won't believe what's coming. Karen Voss staggered through London's damp streets, her gray sweater stiff with dried egg yolk, the sting of Tanya Brooks's betrayal burning hotter than the booze from the Channel 5 studio. Her last $5,000 had bought her a public flogging, her fake apology twisted into a racist rant by a Coleman plant. She'd lost her family, her savings, her dignity, everything but the flicker of defiance smoldering in her gut. She clutched her cracked phone, its screen dark since she'd ignored the latest news alert. Karen Voss's fake apology exposed. Public fury reignites. Her hotel was a trashed ruin, her name a curse, but she wouldn't break. Not yet. She trudged toward a rental car lot near Camden, her soggy shoes squelching, planning to drive somewhere, anywhere to regroup. Could she still fight back with nothing left? She reached the lot, a gravel patch ringed by chain link, and handed over her credit card, maxed out but barely enough for a beat-up Fiat. The clerk, a greasy-haired kid with a nose ring, smirked as he swiped it. You're that lady from the plane, right? She snatched the keys without answering, her jaw tight, and slid into the driver's seat, the vinyl creaking under her weight. She'd head north, maybe Manchester, find a cheap motel, figure out her next move. But as she pulled onto the M1, blue lights flashed in her rearview, a police van screeching to a halt behind her. 2 officers leapt out, their boots pounding the asphalt, and yanked her door open. Karen Voss, step out! The taller one barked, his baton tapping his thigh. She froze, her hands trembling on the wheel. What's this about? They dragged her onto the wet pavement, her knees scraping as they cuffed her wrists, the metal biting into her skin. You're under arrest for drug trafficking, the shorter officer said, his voice flat, pulling a plastic bag from her trunk. Inside, white powder gleamed under his flashlight. Cocaine, maybe heroin, she couldn't tell. Her stomach lurched, her voice shrill. That's not mine, this is a frame-up. The tall one smirked, hauling her to her feet. Tell it to the judge. She twisted, spotting a tow truck already hooking her Fiat, its driver avoiding her gaze. The bag had been planted, hadn't it? She'd never touched drugs, not once in her 12 years at Horizon. As they shoved her into the van, the Colemans' faces flashed in her mind. Malcolm's steady stare, Grace's icy smile, Jordan's mocking grin. This was their doing. The station was a gray bunker, its fluorescent lights buzzing as Karen sat in a holding cell, the cuffs swapped for a cold bench. Her sweater reeked, her hair matted, but her mind raced. She pounded the bars, shouting, I'm innocent! Check the car, it's a rental! A guard, a burly man with a shaved head, ignored her, flipping through a magazine. Hours later, a detective strode in, his trench coat dripping from the rain. Miss Voss, he said, his tone clipped, we found 3 ounces in your trunk. Prints match yours. Care to explain? She leapt up, her voice cracking. Someone planted it, I've been set up. He raised an eyebrow, jotting notes. Convenient story, you've got a court date tomorrow, sit tight. She sank back, her breath shallow, the cell's damp walls closing in. Who could have done this so fast? Court came too soon, a drab room with peeling paint and a judge perched behind a scratched desk. Karen stood in borrowed scrubs, her sweater confiscated as evidence, her wrists raw from the cuffs. The prosecutor, a wiry woman with a sharp bob, laid out the case. Karen Voss, already infamous for racial profiling, now caught with narcotics. This is no coincidence. Karen's public defender, a nervous kid fresh out of law school, stammered, "She claims it's a setup, Your Honor." The prosecutor smirked, sliding a folder across the bench. "We have texts from her phone, sent 2 years ago to a known dealer, Officer Craig Hensley. Need help handling passengers tonight." Hensley's in custody, singing like a bird. Karen's jaw dropped, her voice a rasp. "Those aren't mine. I don't know him." But the judge's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. The texts glowed. On a screen, projected for the room. Her number, her words, time-stamped from a flight she vaguely recalled. She'd bragged to Hensley, a crooked cop she'd met at a bar, about keeping troublemakers in line, but drugs? Never. The Coleman's lawyer, Edward Klein, stepped forward, his gray suit pristine, his voice smooth. "Your Honor, Miss Voss has a history. She targeted my clients, Malcolm Grace and Jordan Coleman, for their race. This is escalation." Karen lunged, the bailiff grabbing her arm. "They framed me. They own Horizon. They've got power." Edward's lips twitched. "Paranoia doesn't erase evidence." The judge banged her gavel, her voice stern. "Bail denied. She's a flight risk. Remanded until trial." Karen's knees buckled, the cell awaiting her again. Headlines erupted as she was hauled away, her scrubs flashing on every screen. Flight attendant's crime spiral. Karen Voss arrested for drugs. The van ride to Brixton prison was silent, her mind reeling. The Colemans had planted the drugs, faked the texts. How? She'd underestimated their reach, their ruthlessness. She'd kicked them off their plane, sure, but this was a guillotine. The prison loomed, its brick walls stark against the gray sky, and they shoved her into intake, her belongings stripped to a plastic bag. A guard, a wiry woman with a scar on her cheek, tossed her a jumpsuit. "You're famous, Voss," she said, smirking. "Better watch your back." Karen changed, the orange fabric rough against her skin. Her cell a concrete box with a thin mattress and a rusted sink. She paced, her bare feet slapping the floor, replaying every moment since Iceland. The Colemans had her prints. How? Her car keys maybe swiped during the studio chaos? The texts were forged, Hensley a pawn, but the judge didn't care. She pounded the wall, her knuckles bruising, until the guard returned, sliding a note. Through the bars. "They're not done with you," it read. Unsigned, the ink black and stark. Her breath hitched, her hands shaking as she crumpled it. Malcolm's words echoed. "You started this war." This wasn't just revenge, it was annihilation. She sank onto the mattress, the cold seeping into her bones, her trial weeks away. Could she prove her innocence from here? At Horizon's London HQ, the Colemans gathered in a glass-walled boardroom, the city skyline sprawling below. Malcolm leaned against the table, his cashmere coat draped over a chair, while Grace sipped tea, her silk blouse catching the morning light. Jordan sprawled in a swivel chair, spinning lazily, his phone glowing with the latest headlines. "She's locked up," he said, chuckling. 3 ounces. Smooth move, Dad." Malcolm's lips twitched, a rare smile. Hensley was cheap, knew her from the old days. Grace set her cup down, her voice soft but firm. She screamed frame up in court. No one listened. Edward Klein entered, his tablet in hand. "The text sealed it. She's got no bail, no chance." Malcolm nodded, his eyes dark. "Good. Next step's ready." Karen curled into a ball on her bunk, the note's warning clawing at her mind. The Colemans had turned her into a criminal, her name now tied to drugs, not just racism. She'd thought Tanya's sting was the bottom, but this was a pit. Jail, isolation, a trial she couldn't win. Her family was gone, her money spent, and now her freedom hung by a thread. She'd begged them to stop, fought them in court, trusted Tanya, and lost every time. But a spark flickered, faint and stubborn. She'd survive this, expose them somehow. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, The Coleman's boardroom buzzed with plans, their next strike poised to shatter her fragile hope. Karen Voss sat hunched in her Brixton prison cell, the orange jumpsuit chafing her skin, the concrete walls pressing in like a tomb. The guard's note, "They're not done with you," lay crumpled on the rusted sink, its warning seared into her mind. She'd been framed, arrested for drugs planted in her rental car, her print somehow on the bag, her old texts twisted to damn her. The judge had denied bail, calling her a flight risk, and now she awaited trial in this 6x8 hole, her name plastered across headlines, flight attendant's crime spiral. Her family was gone, her savings drained, her hotel trashed. She'd hit bottom, hadn't she? But as she traced a crack in the wall with her bruised knuckle, the Coleman's faces loomed. Malcolm's steady resolve, Grace's cold elegance, Jordan's mocking grin. This wasn't the end. They'd promised worse. The cell block buzzed with morning noise, shouts and clangs echoing through the bars as inmates shuffled to breakfast. Karen lagged behind, her bare feet slapping the icy floor, her stomach knotted. She'd seen the looks during intake, hardened women with tattoos and scars, their eyes narrowing as the guard smirked. "You're famous, Voss." The viral video from Iceland, her sneering, "They don't deserve first class," had reached even here. She grabbed a tray, gray slop oozing onto cracked plastic, and slid onto a bench, her head low. Could she keep quiet? Stay invisible? A shadow fell over her, and she looked up. 3 inmates towered above, their faces twisted, 2 with shaved heads, 1 with a jagged scar across her cheek. "You're the plain bitch," Scar said, her voice gravelly. "Heard you hate people like us." Karen's pulse spiked, her tray trembling in her hands. "I don't want trouble," she muttered, but Scar snatched the tray, hurling it across the room. Slop splattered the wall, and the other 2 closed in, fists clenched. "Too late," Shaved One growled, grabbing Karen's collar and yanking her to her feet. The mess hall went quiet, inmates turning to watch, some grinning, others muttering. "She kicked those black owners off," Shaved Two said loud enough for all to hear. "Thinks she's better." Karen twisted, her voice shrill. "That's not true, it's a setup." Scar laughed, a guttural sound, and slammed her fist into Karen's gut. Air rushed out, her knees buckling as she crumpled to the floor, gasping. Hadn't she suffered enough? Fists rained down, boots stomping her ribs, her nose shattering with a wet crunch as blood gushed onto the concrete. She curled into a ball, arms shielding her face, screams tearing from her throat. "Stop, please!" The inmates didn't relent. Scar kicked her spine, Shaved One cracked her jaw, shaved. 2 stomped her arm until it snapped, the bone jutting through skin. Pain seared through her, white-hot and blinding, her vision blurring as blood pooled beneath her. The mess hall roared, a chorus of cheers and jeers, until guards finally charged in, batons swinging. They dragged the attackers off, their laughter echoing, and hauled Karen to her feet, her body limp, her left arm dangling uselessly. "You started it," a guard barked, his badge glinting. "Jenkins." She spat blood, her voice a rasp. "I didn't." They tossed her into the infirmary, a dank room with stained sheets and a flickering bulb. A nurse, her face bored, stitched her nose, muttering, "Keep your head down next time." Karen's arm throbbed, the break untreated. X-rays were backlogged, the nurse said. They cuffed her to the bed, her wrist raw, and left her there, the pain a relentless pulse. Hours later, Jenkins returned, his boots scuffing the floor. "Warden's orders. Solitary. You're a troublemaker." She stared, her swollen eyes wide. "Me? They attacked me." He smirked, uncuffing her and dragging her down a dim hall, her broken arm screaming with every step. The solitary cell was a coffin, dark, damp, 8 feet by 4, a single bulb buzzing overhead. He shoved her in, the steel door slamming shut, locking her in 23 hours a day with her own blood and despair. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, the cold seeping into her bones. Her nose throbbed, her ribs ached, her arm hung limp, the pain a constant roar. She scratched at the concrete, her nails tearing, sanity slipping as the hours bled into days. The viral video had followed her here, turned inmates into executioners. She'd thought jail was the worst. Now it was a battlefield. Could she survive this? Footsteps broke the silence, heavy and deliberate, and the slot in the door slid open. A guard's hand dropped a letter, yellowed and creased, landing on the floor. She crawled to it, her good hand shaking as she unfolded it. Horizon Airways versus Karen Voss. Civil suit for inciting unrest. $100,000. Her breath stopped, her eyes stinging. The Colemans had dropped the drug charges, only to sue her for the riot she hadn't started. She clutched the paper, her sobs echoing in the tiny space. $100,000. She had nothing, not a penny left after Tanya's sting. The Colemans had orchestrated this, hadn't they? Freed her from one trap to spring another, using her beating as ammo. She rocked back and forth, the walls blurring through tears, Malcolm's voice haunting her. "You'll burn." They'd turned her into a punching bag, then sued her for bleeding. She'd begged, fought, trusted, and lost every time, and now her body was broken, her freedom a taunt. The slot opened again, Jenkins's voice gruff. "You're out. Charges. Dropped. Get moving." She stumbled to her feet, dazed, the door swinging wide as he tossed her a bag. Her scrubs, blood-stained and torn. Released? Why now? She limped through the prison gates, the afternoon sun harsh against her battered face. Her arm cradled against her chest. A crowd waited. Paparazzi, their cameras flashing, snapping her swollen nose, her limp, her orange-stained scrubs. "Karen, why'd they let you go?" A reporter shouted, but she shoved past, her good hand shielding her eyes. Her phone, returned, in the bag, buzzed with alerts. Karen Voss freed, civil suit looms. She didn't read them, her legs carrying her to a bus stop, the fine and lawsuit a noose around her neck. She'd thought freedom was a win, hadn't she? But the Colemans, shadow loomed, their civil suit a fresh blade. She boarded a bus, penniless, her broken arm throbbing, tabloids already printing her bloody exit. At Horizon's London HQ, the Colemans sat in their glass-walled boardroom, the Thames glinting below. Malcolm swirled his bourbon, his cashmere, sweater dark against the light, while Grace sipped tea, her silk blouse crisp. Jordan lounged at the table, his laptop open to prison footage, leaked by a guard, showing Karen's beating, her screams muted. "Drop the drugs," hit her with the suit, he said, popping a candy into his mouth. "Smart." Grace nodded, her voice low. "She's got nothing left to pay with." Malcolm set his glass down, his eyes narrowing. "She'll feel this one longer." Edward Klein leaned against the wall, his tablet glowing. "Court's set. She's finished. They'd broken her body, now they'd break her spirit, their plan tightening like a vice." Karen slumped on the bus, her head against the grimy window, London's gray streets blurring past. Her arm needed a cast, her nose stitches, but she had no money, no home, no one. The Colemans had freed her from jail only to chain her with debt. Their lawsuit a cruel twist after the beating she'd endured for their video. She'd thought Tanya's trap was brutal. This was worse, her body and soul crushed in tandem. She clenched her good fist, a spark of rage flickering. She'd expose them somehow, even broken. But as she stared at her reflection, bloody, hollow, the Colemans' boardroom hummed, their next move poised to bury her deeper still. Karen Voss slumped against the grimy bus window, her blood-stained scrubs clinging to her battered body, the London skyline fading into a gray haze. Her nose throbbed beneath crude stitches, her broken arm hung limp without a cast. And the Colemans' latest blow, a $100,000 civil suit for inciting unrest, weighed heavier than the prison beating she'd endured. Released from Brixton after the drug charges mysteriously dropped, she'd limped through paparazzi flashes, her freedom a cruel jest. No money, no family, no home. Her hotel trashed, her savings gone to Tanya's sting. She'd thought jail was the abyss, hadn't she? But as the bus rattled toward a shelter near King's Cross, her cracked phone buzzed with a faint signal, a job listing glowing. Waitress, no experience needed. A lifeline, maybe? She clutched it, her good hand trembling, vowing to claw back some shred of normalcy. The shelter was a squat brick building, its air thick with mildew and despair, cots crammed with coughing strangers. Karen checked in, her scrubs swapped for a donated hoodie, the sleeve dangling over her broken arm. She slept fitfully, the suit's threat looping in her mind, until dawn broke, and she limped to the diner, a greasy spoon called Mick's, its neon sign flickering. Mick, a barrel-chested man with a stained apron, squinted at her. "You look rough," he grunted, but handed her a notepad. "Tables 3 and 5, don't screw up." She nodded, her jaw tight, and shuffled to work, her arm throbbing with every tray she balanced. Could she rebuild here, away from the Coleman's reach? For a fleeting moment, she dared to hope, her pride swallowing the indignity of slinging hash browns instead of commanding a first-class cabin. 2 days in, the illusion shattered. A customer, a wiry man with a trucker hat, stared too long as she poured his coffee, her stitches stark under the diner's harsh lights. "You're her," he said, loud enough for the room to hush. "That racist chick from the plane." Karen froze, the pot shaking in her hand. "I'm just working," she muttered, but he stood, his voice booming. "Racist trash," he spat. In her face, the warm glob hitting her cheek, and she recoiled, coffee splashing the floor. Heads turned, forks clattered, and Mick stormed over, his face red. "What's this?" The trucker pointed, spitting again. "She's that Karen Voss, kicked black folks off a plane." Mick's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Out. You're fired. I don't need this." She stumbled back, wiping her face, her voice a rasp. "I didn't—" The street swallowed her, the diner's door slamming shut, her hoodie soaked in coffee and spit. She'd lasted 48 hours, her first job since Horizon torched in an instant. She limped to another listing, a barista, gig near Camden, but the manager, a wiry woman with pink hair, Googled her name mid-interview. "Karen Voss? No way. Get lost." A warehouse job followed, then a gas station, each door slamming faster than the last. Her phone buzzed with rejections, her name a poison spreading beyond London. Hadn't she paid enough? She slumped on a park bench, her broken arm cradled when a shadow fell. A man in a suit, his accent American. "Malcolm Coleman sends regards," he said, handing her a letter before vanishing. She tore it open, her breath hitching. Blacklisted. From all airlines worldwide. Horizon Airways. Her knees buckled, the paper fluttering to the wet grass. She staggered to a tube station, its dim tunnels her new refuge, clutching a stolen blanket against the chill. No airline would touch her. Not British Airways, not Delta, not even budget carriers. Malcolm's quiet word had spread, a global net choking her out. She'd flown for 12 years, ruled the skies, and now she was grounded, her wings clipped by the man she'd ejected from his own jet. She curled into a corner, the blanket reeking of sweat, her stomach growling. She hadn't eaten since Mick's. Passers-by stared, some snapping photos, whispers of "that's her" cutting through the rumble of trains. Could she sink lower? Her phone, nearly dead, buzzed with a news alert. Coleman's testify at UN Forum. Karen Voss named face of aviation racism. She tapped it, her vision blurring as Grace's voice streamed, calm and damning. "She's proof of the hate we fight." The footage played. Malcolm in a crisp suit, Grace in silk, Jordan smirking beside them, addressing a packed UN hall. "Karen Voss didn't just target us," Malcolm said, his deep voice resonating. "She's the symptom of a system that judges before it sees." Grace nodded, her eyes sharp. "We've blacklisted her to protect others." The hall applauded, delegates nodding, and Karen's name flashed on screen, her Iceland sneer frozen next to racist poster child. She dropped the phone, her good hand clawing her hair, a sob ripping free. They'd turned her into a global pariah, a cautionary tale for the world, her beating in Brixton now a footnote to their crusade. She'd thought the lawsuit was their endgame. What was this? She slept in the station, her broken arm a dull ache, her dreams jagged with Malcolm's bourbon glass, Grace's teacup, Jordan's mocking laugh. Morning came, and she begged for change, her hoodie hood up, her stitched face hidden. A few coins clinked into her palm, but most spat, literally, figuratively. Her name a curse even here. She bought a stale bun, nibbling it on a bench, when a TV in a shop window blared. Karen Voss blacklist sparks debate, justice or overreach. Pundits argued, but the Coleman's narrative held. her racism, her downfall, their triumph. She stood, her legs wobbly, and shuffled to a shelter, its cots her only roof. The manager hesitated, then let her in, muttering, "Don't cause trouble." She nodded, her pride ashes, her fight fading. Was there any way back? At the UN Forum, in Geneva, the Colemans wrapped their testimony, the hall still buzzing with their words. Malcolm adjusted his cufflinks, his broad frame towering as he shook hands with delegates. Grace sipped water, her silk scarf catching the stage lights, her poise unshaken. Jordan scrolled X, chuckling at a meme. Karen's stitched face captioned, "Grounded forever." "She's toast," he said, popping gum. Grace glanced at Malcolm, her voice low. "No job, no home. She's learning." Malcolm nodded, his eyes dark. Not enough yet. They'd blacklisted her, turned her into a symbol, but their plan stretched further, a shadow creeping closer. Edward Klein joined them, his tablet glowing. "Next phase is locked. She won't see it coming." They smiled, a quiet pact sealed. Karen lay on her shelter cot, the springs creaking, her broken arm cradled against her chest. No job would take her, no airline would touch her. Malcolm's word was law, his reach global. The diner spit, the UN spotlight, the blacklist. They'd stripped her bare, left her a beggar in a city that despised her. She'd begged them once, fought them twice, trusted Tanya, endured jail, and still they crushed her. Her good fist clenched, a faint spark flickering. She'd expose their game somehow, even from this pit. But as she drifted into fitful sleep, the Coleman's Geneva suite glowed, their next strike poised to obliterate her fragile defiance. Hey YouTube fam, what's your take? Comment number 1 if you think Karen's blacklist is fair payback for her actions, or number 2, if you reckon the Colemans are piling on too hard. Should she have seen their power coming? Smash that like button if you're gripped by this relentless saga, and subscribe to catch every brutal twist ahead. Tell us, can Karen scrape her way out of this gutter, or is she doomed to stay there? Now, hold tight. With the world against her, what's the Coleman's next move to seal her? Fate, you'll be floored by what's next. Karen Voss huddled on a creaking cot in the King's Cross shelter, her donated hoodie reeking of mildew, her broken arm throbbing beneath a frayed sleeve. The Coleman's global blacklist had slammed every door. No airline, no diner, not even a gas station would hire her, Malcolm's quiet word turning her name into a plague. The UN Forum had cemented it, Grace's voice branding her proof of systemic hate to a clapping world, her stitched face plastered across screens. She'd begged for coins in the tube, her pride dust, her body aching from Brixton's beating. The $100,000 civil suit a noose she couldn't escape. She'd hit bottom, hadn't she? But as she clutched a stale bun, her good hand trembling, a spark of rage flickered. She'd crash their precious forum, scream her truth, make them pay. Could she still fight with nothing left? The Geneva trip was a blur of desperation. Stolen bus tickets, a freight train she'd slipped onto, her scrubs swapped for a scavenged coat. She reached the UN hall 3 days later, her stitched nose crusted, her arm a dull fire, her hair matted under a hood. The building loomed, glass and steel glinting in the Swiss sun, delegates streaming in for the Coleman's closing speech. She shoved through, her voice hoarse as she shouted, "They've ruined me!" Heads turned, security lunged, but she broke free, staggering into the chamber, her coat flapping. Malcolm stood at the podium, mid-sentence, his charcoal suit crisp, Grace beside him in silk, Jordan smirking from a chair. The room froze, gasps rippling as Karen pointed, her good arm shaking. "You framed me. You did this." Could they silence her here? Guards tackled her, their boots scuffing the polished floor, pinning her wrists as cameras rolled. 50 million viewers streaming live on X YouTube, every platform buzzing. "Let me go," she screamed, thrashing, her broken arm searing as a guard twisted it. Malcolm paused, his deep voice steady. "She's the face of systemic hate, disrupting even now." Grace nodded, her eyes cold. "Proof of what we've said." The hall murmured, delegates nodding, phones flashing as Karen's meltdown burned into history. They dragged her out, her screams echoing. Liars! Monsters! Her coat tearing on the marble steps. She'd wanted to expose them, hadn't she? But the footage spun her into a mad woman, her defiance flipped into guilt by their calm rebuttal. She hit the Geneva streets, the guards dumping, her near a canal, her body bruised, her breath ragged. Night fell and she limped to a makeshift shelter, cardboard and tarps under a bridge, shared with drifters who eyed her warily. She curled up, the cold biting her stitches when shouts erupted nearby. A mob surged from the shadows, 20 strong, their faces twisted. Locals, students, vigilantes, clutching bats and bottles. There she is, a woman yelled, her voice shrill. Burn the bigot! Karen scrambled up, her good hand clawing. The tarp, but they closed in. A bottle shattering beside her, glass slicing her cheek. She ran, her legs wobbly, the mob howling as they torched her shelter, flames licking the night sky. Hadn't she lost enough? A bat cracked her ribs, her gasp cut short as she stumbled, a boot slamming her back. She fell, mud caking her stitches, her broken arm pinned as a man roared, "You don't belong anywhere!" Bottles rained down, one splitting her brow, blood blinding her as she crawled, her good hand clawing dirt. The mob circled, their fury a wall. Spit, kicks, a fist to her jaw, until sirens wailed, scattering them into the dark. She lay panting, her coat singed, her body a map of welts and cuts, the shelter ashes behind her. A stranger approached, his voice soft. "You okay?" She nodded, dazed, letting him help her to a bench, his coat warm around her shoulders. Relief flickered. Someone cared, didn't they? Her hope died fast. Flashbulbs popped, paparazzi swarming as the stranger backed off, his phone out, snapping her bloodied face. "Karen's final fall!" he shouted. A gossip hound, not a savior. She lunged, her good hand swiping, but he danced away, the mob's attack now a photo op. Her phone, salvaged from the tarp, buzzed with alerts. Karen Voss, attacked after. UN outburst. Proof of guilt? The pics spread, her swollen eye, her singed coat, her broken arm twisted, 50 million views climbing to 60. She sank to the bench, sobbing, her rescuer's betrayal a fresh wound. The Colemans had turned. Her plea into a circus, her beating into evidence. What could she do now? Aboard their private jet, cruising at 40,000 feet, the Colemans watched the chaos unfold on a flat screen. Malcolm swirled his bourbon, his cashmere sweater dark against the leather seat, while Grace sipped champagne, her silk blouse catching the cabin's soft glow. Jordan sprawled across a couch, his hoodie up, scrolling X as the mob footage looped. Karen's screams, the flames, the paparazzi's glee. 50 million saw her lose it, he said, chuckling. 60 now. Grace's lips curved, her voice low. She thought she'd shame us. Malcolm set his glass down, his eyes glinting. She handed us the win. They'd stayed poised at the UN, their testimony unshaken, turning her outburst into their triumph. The mob? A bonus they hadn't planned, but welcomed. Karen shivered on the Geneva bench, her singed coat useless against the night, blood dripping from her brow onto the cracked wood. The mob had nearly killed her. The paparazzi had feasted on her ruin, and the Colemans had spun it all, her crash at the UN, her beating, into proof of systemic hate. She'd stormed into fight to scream her truth, and they'd flipped. It, her defiance now a global spectacle of guilt. Her shelter was ash, her body broken worse than Brixton, her name a rallying cry for vengeance. She'd thought the blacklist was their peak. What was this? She wiped her face, her good hand sticky, and stood, wobbling toward an alley, her breath shallow. She'd hide, survive, strike back somehow. At Horizon's Geneva suite, the Colemans landed, stepping into a plush room overlooking the lake. Malcolm adjusted his cufflinks, his broad frame steady, while Grace smoothed her scarf, her poise intact. Jordan flopped onto a sofa, his phone glowing with memes. Karen's bloody face captioned, "Bigot down." "She's trending again," he said, popping gum. Grace glanced at Malcolm, her voice soft. "No one's helping her now." Malcolm nodded, his eyes dark. She's isolated. Next move's hers, if she's got one. They'd turned her into a pariah, a punching bag, a symbol. Their hands clean as the world did their work. Edward Klein joined them, his tablet in hand. Mob's untraceable. She's got nothing left. They smiled, their victory sharp and silent. Karen collapsed in the alley, her back against a dumpster, the stench of rot mingling with her blood. Her ribs ached, her brow bled, her broken arm pulsed. Brixton's beating was a warm-up compared to this. The UN crash had been her stand, her last gasp, and they twisted it, unleashed a mob, let cameras finish her. She'd lost her job, her family, her freedom, her shelter. Now her body was a wreck, her name a death sentence. She clutched her knees, a faint growl in her throat. She'd make them pay, even from this gutter. But as she shivered, the Colemans, jet hummed above, their next strike already loaded, her defiance a candle in their storm. Karen Voss slumped against a Geneva alley dumpster, her singed coat barely shielding her from the biting wind, her body a tapestry of bruises and cuts from the mob's fury. Her stitched nose throbbed, her broken arm pulsed beneath a torn sleeve, and her ribs ached with every shallow breath. The UN crash and shelter torching had left her a wreck. The Colemans had turned her outburst into a global spectacle. 60 million viewers watching her scream, "They've ruined me." Only to be branded a mad bigot, the mob's attack spun as proof of guilt. She'd lost everything: job, family, freedom, shelter. Her blacklist ensuring no corner of the world would take her. She'd hit the abyss, hadn't she? But as she clutched her knees, blood crusting her brow, a flicker of defiance burned. She'd expose them, even if it killed her. Footsteps crunched on gravel, deliberate and close, and Karen tensed, her good hand groping for a shard of glass beside her. A man emerged from the shadows, mid-40s, his suit sharp despite the alley's filth, his graying hair slicked back. "Karen Voss?" he asked, his voice smooth, American accented. She squinted, her grip tightening on the glass. "Who's asking?" He crouched, unfazed by her snarl, his hazel eyes glinting. "Paul Decker, Horizon exec. I've got an offer." Her pulse spiked, the Coleman's name flashing in her mind. Malcolm Grace Jordan. But she held still. "What offer?" Paul smiled, thin and practiced. "Testify against the Colemans. Tell a tribunal they've overreached, framed you, ruined you. We'll get your job back, clear your name." Could this be real? She dropped the glass, her breath hitching, suspicion warring with desperation. "Why me? Why now?" Paul straightened, brushing dirt from his knees. "Some of us at Horizon think they've gone too far. Blacklist, lawsuits, jail. You're the proof. Depositions tomorrow, Geneva courthouse. Say yes and you're back." In the sky. Her mind raced, her job, her wings, a chance to hit back at the Colemans. She'd trusted Tanya, fallen for her sting. But this felt different, didn't it? Paul offered a hand and she took it, wincing as he pulled her up, her broken arm screaming. "I'm in," she rasped, her jaw set. He nodded, handing her a card. "Meet me at 9. Clean up. You're a mess." She clutched it, a lifeline in the gutter. She spent the night in a shelter, a dank room of coughing drifters, washing her, face in a cracked sink, the cold water stinging her stitches. Her coat hid the worst, blood, burns, bruises, but her reflection was a ghost, hollow and fierce. She limped to the courthouse at dawn, her scrubs swapped for scavenged jeans, Paul waiting in a side room with a notary, a stout woman with a pinched face. "Ready?" he asked, sliding a stack of papers across a scratched table. Karen nodded, her good hand trembling as she signed, her voice steady. "They framed me with drugs, sued me for a riot I didn't start, blacklisted me globally. They're tyrants." The notary stamped it, Paul's smile widening. "Good. This goes to the tribunal today. You're free soon." She exhaled, her chest light. Was this her win? The deposition hit fast, a sleek office with wood-paneled walls, a panel of 3 suits, 2 men, 1 woman, peering at her over glasses. Paul sat beside her, his suit crisp as she spoke, her voice raw but firm. "The Colemans ruined me because I questioned their seats. Drugs in my car, planted, prison beating, their doing, blacklist, their word. I've got nothing left. The panel scribbled, the woman nodding faintly, and Karen's hope flared. She'd flipped it, hadn't she? Paul squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "Nailed it." They stepped out, the Geneva sun harsh, and he grinned. "You're back at Horizon once this clears, rest up." She nodded, dazed, limping to a bench, her broken arm cradled. Freedom dangled, tantalizingly close. Her relief shattered hours later, a knock jolting her from a shelter cot nap. 2 Swiss cops loomed, their badges glinting, cuffs out. "Karen Voss, you're under arrest," the taller one barked, yanking her up, her arms searing as they twisted. "Sign perjury, deposition's fake," she flailed, her voice shrill. "What?" "Paul Decker set it up, he's Horizon." The shorter cop smirked, shoving her toward a van. "Decker works for the Colemans. You lied under oath. Doctored audio proves it." Her stomach plummeted, her knees buckling as they cuffed her, the metal biting her raw wrist. Audio? She hadn't heard it, but Paul's grin flashed. Another sting, another trap. How had she fallen again? The station was a blur, her scrubs back, her cell colder than Brixton's. A 10x10 box with a flickering bulb. A guard slid a tablet through the bars, its screen glowing with her deposition. Her voice, yes, but twisted. "I made it all up," it played, her words spliced with lies she'd never said. "The Colemans did nothing. I'm the racist." Her jaw dropped, her good fist pounding the wall. "That's not me. They edited it." The guard shrugged, locking the door, her screams bouncing off concrete. 10 years the charge loomed. Perjury, a felony. Her testimony flipped into a confession. Paul had baited her, the Coleman's puppet, and she'd bitten, her last gasp snuffed out. Could she escape this? The cell block hummed, inmates whispering. Her name. Plain bitch. Liar. Their voices seeping through the walls. She'd seen it in Brixton, the hate her viral video sparked, and now it was back, sharper, deadlier. A riot brewed, shouts rising, trays clanging, and she curled into a corner, her broken arm throbbing, her stitched face slick with sweat. The Colemans had turned her redemption into a noose, their lawyer's smirk haunting her. Edward Klein, his gray suit pristine in her mind. "You're predictable," he'd said in court. She'd trusted Paul, thought Horizon dissented, but it was their game, her hope a toy they'd crushed. She rocked, her breath shallow, the cell a cage for a bird with no wings. At Horizon's Geneva suite, the Colemans lounged, the lake shimmering beyond glass walls. Malcolm sipped bourbon, his cashmere sweater dark, while Grace stirred tea, her silk blouse gleaming. Jordan sprawled on a couch, his hoodie up, scrolling X as the fake audio trended. "Karen Voss confesses." She grinned, he said, popping candy. Thought she'd won. Grace's lips twitched, her voice soft. "Paul's worth every penny." Malcolm set his glass down, his eyes glinting. "She's back in jail, facing 10 years. Perfect." Edward Klein entered, his tablet glowing. "Audio's airtight. Tribunal's done. She's cooked." They'd baited her, flipped her stand, and locked her away, their hands clean as she sank. Karen sat on her bunk, the cold seeping into her bones, the doctored audio replaying in her skull. 10 years loomed, a decade for a lie she hadn't told, her job a mirage, her name a death knell. The Colemans had stripped her, job, family, freedom, body, and now her truth, twisting her fight into a confession. She'd crashed the UN, survived a mob, and still they'd outplayed her, Paul's suit a mask for their will. Her good fist clenched, a faint growl rising. She'd prove it, even from here, expose the edit. But as she stared at the bars, the cell block's shouts grew louder, a riot swelling, her name on every tongue. The Coleman's next strike already in motion. Karen Voss cowered in her Geneva prison cell, the orange scrubs clinging to her battered frame, the concrete walls vibrating with the growing roar of a riot outside. The Colemans had trapped her again. Paul Decker's fake redemption flipped into a perjury charge, doctored audio twisting her deposition into a confession. "I made it all up." 10 years loomed, her broken arm pulsing beneath a frayed sleeve, her stitched nose aching from Brixton's beating, now worsened by the mob's fury. The blacklist had stripped her jobs, the civil suit her money. And now this cell locked her freedom, inmates chanting plain bitch through the bars. She'd hit the edge, hadn't she? But as she clutched her bunk, the riot's chaos a drumbeat, a spark of defiance flared. She'd survive this, expose their lies even if it killed her. The cell block erupted, shouts turning to screams, metal trays clanging against bars as footsteps thundered closer. Karen pressed into the corner, her good hand gripping the mattress, her broken arm a dull fire. The door flew open, 3 inmates storming in, tattooed, wild-eyed, one wielding a shiv carved from a spoon, its edge glinting under the flickering bulb. "You're done, Voss," the leader snarled, her voice a rasp, lunging with the blade. Karen rolled off the bunk, the shiv grazing her shoulder, blood blooming on her scrubs as she scrambled up, her breath ragged. "I didn't do it," she screamed, but they charged, fists and boots flying. Hadn't she taken enough? The shiv stabbed her thigh, a hot jolt tearing through her as she fell, her good hand clawing the floor. The second inmate kicked her ribs, a crack splitting the air, her gasps choking on blood as the third stomped her broken arm, the bone grinding deeper. Pain blinded her, her screams lost in the riot's roar, cells banging open, guards shouting, a siren wailing somewhere distant. She crawled, her nails scraping concrete, aiming for the guard tower's shadow beyond the bars. Could she make it? A boot slammed her back, flattening her, the shiv poised above her chest, but a baton cracked down, the leader yelping as guards flooded in, their shouts a blur. They dragged the inmates off, hauling Karen up, her body limp, blood pooling. Beneath her, the infirmary was a haze, a gurney creaking under her weight, a medic stitching her thigh as she faded in and out, her ribs a jagged ache, her arm a twisted ruin. "Lucky you're alive," the medic muttered, his gloved hands slick with her blood, but her mind spun. Lucky. The Colemans had turned her into prey, her viral video a death warrant in here. Hours later, a guard loomed, tall, his badge glinting. "Rue." "You're out," he said, tossing her a bag, her scrubs torn and bloody. Charges dropped. "Move." She blinked, her stitched face throbbing, her voice a rasp. "Dropped? Why?" He shrugged, uncuffing her. "Orders. Get going." She stumbled up, dazed, clutching the bag. Freedom again, but at what cost? She limped through the prison gates, the Swiss dusk cold against her cuts, her broken arm cradled, her thigh bandaged but leaking. Paparazzi swarmed, their flashes blinding, shouting, "Karen, why'd they free you?" She shoved past, her good hand shielding her swollen eye, collapsing onto a bench as they dispersed, her phone buzzing in the bag, alerts screaming, "Karen Voss released, charges mysteriously dropped." She didn't read them, her breath shallow, the riot's pain a fresh hell atop Brixton's scars. She'd survived, hadn't she? A drone hummed overhead, a tiny speck dropping a note into her lap. "Confess, or we bury you." Her stomach lurched, the Coleman's hand clear. Freedom was their leash, not her win. She staggered to a bus stop, her scrubs a beacon for stairs, her body a wreck, stitches on her nose and thigh, bruises blooming, ribs cracked, arm useless. The note burned in her pocket, a threat she couldn't shake. They'd dropped the perjury, just like the drugs, only to tighten their grip, their civil suit still looming, her blacklist unbroken. She boarded a bus, sinking into a seat, the hum of tires a dull roar as Geneva blurred past. She'd thought release was escape, a chance to fight, but this was their game. Let her crawl out, then crush her again. Could she outrun them now? Her phone buzzed, a fake warrant trending. Karen Voss wanted, fugitive alert. Forged. But the world swallowed it. Her name a hunted thing. The shelter she found was a crumbling shack near the lake, its cot sagging, its air sour with unwashed bodies. She collapsed onto one, her good hand clutching the note, her mind replaying the riot, the shiv, the kicks, the guards' late rush. The Colemans had orchestrated this, hadn't they? Dropped the charges to dodge blame, let the inmates do their work, then loosed her into a world primed to hate her. She'd crashed the UN, survived a mob, trusted Paul, and still they'd outplayed. Her body a punching bag, her freedom a taunt. She curled up, her breath ragged, a faint growl rising. She'd exposed their puppet strings, even broken. But as she drifted off, paparazzi lingered outside, their lenses glinting, her every gasp fodder for their machine. At Horizon's Geneva suite, the Colemans gathered, the lake's shimmer a backdrop to their quiet triumph. Malcolm stood by the window, his bourbon glass catching the chandelier's glow, his cashmere sweater dark and steady. Grace sat on a velvet chair, her silk scarf pristine, sipping tea with a faint smile. Jordan lounged on a sofa, his hoodie up, scrolling X as the fake warrant trended. Karen Voss fugitive racking up views. "She's out, bleeding and running," he said, chuckling, popping a candy. Grace set her cup down, her voice low. "The riot was messy but effective." Malcolm turned, his eyes glinting. "Charges dropped, suit's still on, she's theirs now." They'd let her go, knowing the world would finish her, their hands clean as ever. Edward Klein leaned against the wall, his tablet glowing with prison logs. Inmates nearly killed. Her, shiv to the thigh, cracked ribs. "She crawled to the tower," he said, his tone flat. Jordan grinned. "Should have seen her face. Pure panic." Grace nodded, her lips curving. "She thinks freedom's hers. Cute." Malcolm sipped his bourbon, his voice deep. "She'll break soon." Next move set. They'd turned her release into a trap, the drone note a whip, the warrant a lash. Her, every step a stumble into their web. They smiled, a silent pact, their jet waiting to lift them above her wreckage. Karen woke on the shelter cot, her thigh leaking through the bandage, her ribs a sharp ache with every breath, her broken arm a twisted weight. The riot had nearly ended her, the shiv's sting a whisper from death, and now this. Released, but hunted. The Coleman's note a promise of more. The fake warrant buzzed online, paparazzi stalking her shadow, her name a death knell louder than ever. She'd fought in court, crashed the UN, trusted twice, and still they'd crushed her, her body and soul shredded. She clenched her good fist, her growl faint but alive. She'd prove their game, even from this hole. But as she stared at the shack's cracked ceiling, the Coleman's jet soared overhead, their final strike poised to snuff her last spark. Karen Voss shivered on a sagging cot in the Geneva shack, her blood-soaked scrubs a grim shroud, the shelter's sour air thick with defeat. Her thigh oozed through a crude bandage, her ribs cracked from the prison riot's boots, her broken arm a twisted ruin beneath a torn sleeve. The Colemans had crushed her, blacklist, lawsuits, jail, mobs, each blow fiercer. Their latest a fake warrant branding her a fugitive after dropping perjury charges. Paparazzi stalked her, the drone's note. "Confess or we bury you." Burning. In her pocket, a promise of more pain. She'd fought, crashed the UN, trusted Paul, survived a shiv, and still they'd won, hadn't they? But as she clutched her knees, blood crusting her stitched brow, a faint growl rose. She'd expose them, even if it was her last act. A junked laptop glowed in the shack's corner, scavenged from a dumpster, its cracked screen flickering as she typed with her good hand. She logged into YouTube, her breath shallow, the shelter's drifters snoring around her. Her name trended, 80 million views on the riot footage, her screams under the shiv a global hit. She clicked, live. The webcam framing her battered face, swollen eye, stitches, blood smears, a ghost of the flight attendant she'd been. "I'm Karen Voss," she rasped, her voice raw. "The Colemans framed me, beat me, broke me. I was wrong in Iceland. I judged them by their skin. I'm sorry." Tears streaked her dirt, her confession a jagged plea. Could this stop them? She hit end, collapsing back, her chest heaving, the video uploading into the void. The live stream exploded, views climbing past 1 million in hours, X buzzing with Karen confesses. She slept fitfully, the laptop's hum a faint comfort, waking to a shadow at her cot. A courier, his cap low, dropped an envelope and vanished. She tore it open, her good hand trembling. A letter from Horizon. Civil suit dropped. Fines donated to anti-racism causes. Stay silent. Her breath caught, her ribs aching as she read. They'd called off their hounds, hadn't they? The warrant faded online, paparazzi thinning, her confession a white flag they'd accepted. She stood, wobbling, her broken arm cradled, and limped. Outside, the lakes shimmer a cruel mirror to her ruin. Freedom, finally, or so she thought. She scavenged food, stale bread, bruised apples, living off Geneva's scraps, her body a wreck, but her mind quiet for the first time in months. The Colemans had stopped, their jet lifting off days ago, news quieting to whispers. Karen Voss broken redeemed. She'd confessed, bared her soul, and they'd backed off, donating her fines, $50,000 to charities. A PR win. She'd won a sliver of peace, hadn't she? But as she shuffled through a market, her hood up, a figure stepped. From the crowd, Jordan Coleman, 16, lanky, his hoodie swapped for a leather jacket, his dark eyes glinting. She froze, her good hand clutching a rotten pear, her pulse spiking. "You?" she croaked, stepping back. He smirked, hands in pockets, his voice low and sharp. "Thought it was over, huh?" She glanced around, the market bustling. No Malcolm, no Grace. "Your parents?" They dropped it. I confessed. Jordan laughed, a sound that chilled her blood, and leaned closer, his breath warm against her stitched face. "They didn't drop anything. I did." Her stomach lurched, her knees wobbling as he pulled out his phone, a sleek black thing glowing with a Horizon logo. "I own it," he said, tapping the screen. "Bought it last year cash, through a shell. Mom and Dad? Figureheads. I've been running this show." She stared, her mind reeling. Jordan, a kid, the mastermind? Could that be true? He scrolled, showing contracts. His name, Jordan A. Coleman, CEO, signed at 16, a billionaire prodigy who'd outbid tycoons in secret. "You kicked me off my plane," he said, his grin fading to steel. "I wanted you to feel powerless like you made us feel." Her breath stopped, the market's noise fading as his words sank in. The blacklist, the drugs, Tanya's sting, Paul's trap, the mobs, all him, not Malcolm, not Grace. She'd begged them, fought them, and he'd watched, a puppeteer pulling strings from a hoodie. "Why?" she rasped, her voice breaking. He shrugged, his eyes cold. "You judged us. I judged you back. Confess? That was my price." She swayed, her broken arm throbbing, the pear dropping to the dirt. He stepped back, his leather creaking, and nodded to a hangar across the lake, its doors glinting in the dusk. "Come see," he said, turning away. She followed, her legs led, her mind a storm. Jordan, not his parents, the architect of her hell. The hangar loomed, a cavern of steel and shadow. Horizon's jet inside, its engines silent. He stopped, facing her, his lanky frame towering now. "I could have killed you," he said, his voice flat. "Shiv was close. But this, watching you crawl, beg, break, that's better." She lunged, her good hand swiping, but he sidestepped, laughing as she fell, her ribs screaming, blood seeping from her thigh. "You're nothing," he said, his smirk back, and walked to the jet, leaving her sprawled. She collapsed, her sobs echoing in the empty hangar, her body a wreck, stitches torn, bruises blooming, arm useless. Jordan had owned Horizon, not Malcolm, not Grace, his teenage mind crafting her ruin. Blacklist, jail, mobs, all his. She'd confessed, thinking it was their mercy, but it was his whim, his game, her fines, his charity flex. She'd fought a shadow, hadn't she? Her Iceland sneer, "You don't belong here," had sparked a war with a kid who'd outplayed her at every turn. She crawled to her knees, her good fist pounding the concrete, her growl a whisper. He'd broken her, left her alive but hollow, a shell in his hangar's dust. Aboard the jet, the Colemans lifted off, the Alps shrinking below. Malcolm sipped bourbon, his cashmere sweater dark, while Grace stirred tea, her silk scarf pristine, both calm as ever. Jordan sprawled across, a seat, his leather jacket creased, scrolling X as the confession video hit 90 million views. "She's done," he said, popping gum, his grin wide. Grace glanced at him, her voice soft. You didn't tell us the hangar part. He shrugged, his eyes glinting. Had to see her face. Worth it. Malcolm chuckled, his deep voice warm. Kid's a genius. They'd played their roles. Figureheads, yes, but proud. Jordan's plan their legacy, his vengeance their crown. The jet climbed, the cabin humming, Geneva's lights fading as they sipped and scrolled, their triumph complete. Jordan had bought Horizon at 15, a secret deal. His billions built on tech and grit, and turned Karen's life into ash. The blacklist was his whisper, the drugs his plant, the mobs his spark. Malcolm and Grace had nodded, but he'd pulled every string. She's alive, Grace mused, her tea steaming. Barely, Jordan said, laughing. They'd donated her fines, a $50,000 flex, leaving her a beggar, her confession, their trophy. The world debated, justice or vengeance, but they didn't care, their jet soaring above it all. Karen lay in the hangar, her breath shallow, the jet's roar fading overhead. Her body was broken, thigh bleeding, ribs cracked, arm a ruin, her soul hollowed by Jordan's truth. He'd owned it all, a 16-year-old billionaire who'd crushed her for one sneer, his parents' pawns in his game. She'd begged, fought, confessed, and he'd watched, his smirk her executioner. She'd thought Malcolm and Grace were the titans. What a fool. Her good hand clawed the floor, her growl silent now, her fight snuffed. The Colemans flew off, sipping wine, their victory a kid's masterpiece, leaving her a cautionary tale. Alive, but a shell, her reckoning complete. Karen Voss's journey and flight attendant kicks black billionaire family off plane, not knowing they own the airline, is a brutal lesson in the cost of unchecked bias and the power of accountability. Her snap judgment, ejecting Malcolm, Grace, and Jordan Coleman from their own jet, unleashed a cascade of consequences she couldn't outrun. What started as a moment of arrogance spiraled into a nightmare of public shaming, legal traps, prison violence, and personal ruin, all orchestrated by Jordan, a teenage billionaire who turned her prejudice into his weapon. The story screams that assumptions based on race aren't just wrong, they're dangerous, igniting fires that burn far beyond intent. Karen's downfall shows how systemic privilege can blind someone to their own flaws, and how those flaws, once exposed, can strip everything away. But it's not just about her. The Coleman's relentless vengeance, blacklists, setups, mobs, raises a mirror to justice itself. Was their response a fair reckoning or a ruthless overreach? Jordan's reveal as the mastermind flips the script, proving power isn't always visible, and those underestimated can strike hardest. The lesson cuts both ways. Prejudice wounds, but so does vengeance unchecked. Karen's confession, forced from a broken shell, hints at redemption's possibility, yet her hollow survival questions its worth. We're left asking, what's the line between punishment and cruelty, and who gets to draw it? Hey, YouTube fam, what do you take from this? Comment below. Did Karen deserve her fate, or did Jordan go too far? Should she have seen it coming? Like if this hit you hard, subscribe for more raw tales, and share to spark the convo. Thanks for riding this wild journey with us. Here's to learning, growing, and facing the truth wherever it leads.